and welcome back to season 2 of Taylor Time. It is so good to see you all again, and to start this season, we're going to be doing another imposter cake, and this time with a little bit of a twist. My sister just recently celebrated her 23rd birthday, so happy birthday, Chloe. And so I'm going to be creating some of her favorite flavors and some of my family's favorite flavors as well. So let's get started. So to start this off, we're going to start by preparing some of our buttercreams. I've already made the buttercreams, but it's good to flavor them so we get extra flavor in our cakes. So my first scoop of ice cream is going to be strawberry. So I have some buttercream here that I've already made, and I have some delicious chopped up strawberries. You can use frozen, you can use fresh, anything will work. But it's always good to have the real fruit or the real thing in there when you're making something, just because it gives it that authentic taste and it doesn't taste too artificial. It's just having good quality products just makes the best tasting cakes. So I'm going to give this a good stir. Usually when I whisk anything with sort of like a liquidy consistency in buttercream, I like to use a whisk, just because sometimes it can slosh around and be a little bit harder to mix. So this is definitely the easiest way to do it. All right, so we have our strawberries mixed in our buttercream, but of course it's nice and strawberry-y. You can see the chunks in there. It looks like nice smooth ice cream, but I want to make it a little bit pinker, just so when you look at it, you immediately know it's strawberry. So I'm going to add just a little bit of food coloring. This part is optional, but it does definitely help to amp up the look of the cake. Just going to add a little bit, and then give this another good stir. All right, so we have our strawberry buttercream prepared, and it smells really, really good. I'm very excited. So now we can start preparing our scoops of ice cream, because it wouldn't be an ice cream sundae without the scoops. So let me go get my cake and I'll be right back. So, whoops, there we go. We have our scoop of cake, and we're actually going to do 2 scoops. But for this first strawberry scoop, I have a 6-inch cake, and I baked it in a spear pan. And on this side, you can see that it kind of stuck to the pan a little bit. So make sure you grease your pans very, very well. And even when stuff like this does happen, it's perfectly fine. Even the most professional cake bakers always make mistakes like this. So we're gonna still use this cake instead of having to bake a whole nother one. So I'm gonna take my strawberry buttercream, and I'm going to take this off our board. This is also a 6-inch board as well. Take a little buttercream, put it down, just to make sure our cake doesn't slide around. Makes it a lot easier to decorate. All right, and now I can take my offset spatula. I've mentioned this in past episodes. An offset spatula is like a decorating tool that makes it a lot easier to decorate cakes, rather than using like a butter knife or a spoon, because sometimes it can drag in the icing and get really messy. So this part right here keeps your hand lifted, so it's easier to ice. And again, for this ice cream cake, you don't have to do strawberry ice cream or strawberry buttercream. You can make it any flavor you would like to make it. The possibilities are endless. Before I was doing this, I was thinking of doing mint chocolate chip. You can do butter pecan, which is my mom's favorite. You can do any flavor you love. Ooh, you can see the chunks of strawberry. It looks super realistic. I already know it's gonna taste amazing. I already know. I can smell it. It just looks amazing. The color is perfect. Super excited. Right? Almost done. And we're gonna end up making this look more like an ice cream scoop a little bit later. Once we put it in our container, so the little edge around the bottom, you don't really have to worry about that because we're going to fix that up once it's in the actual container. Perfect. So we're going to put this in the fridge for maybe about 10 minutes. It doesn't have to be frozen solid, but just make sure that your buttercream isn't like super soft anymore. It just makes it a little bit easier to handle a little bit later. All right, so our cake is in the fridge and we can move on to our next flavor of ice cream. And now this flavor, this one is inspired by my sister since it is her birthday. So I texted her and I asked her, Chloe, what's your favorite flavor of ice cream? Because usually it's cookie dough, but you know, it changes all the time. So she told me that she likes chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream with chocolate fudge and sprinkles on top. So that's what we're gonna do for her scoop of ice cream. So to prepare this, we're gonna start by making an eggless cookie dough so you can see the real bits of cookie dough in the ice cream. And it's very important that this is safe to eat raw. So what I did is I actually took my flour and I baked it at 350 degrees for about 10 to 12 minutes. And this will kill all the bacteria that's in the flour, so it's safe to eat. And of course, since this is gonna be safe to eat, we don't have any eggs in this flour, but in this batter, but it's still delicious. So you can do this by hand, and that's how you get a lot of muscles during baking. If you ever see someone who has a lot of muscles, they probably bake. So you can either mix it by hand, or you can use a stand mixer, which is what I'm gonna do today. I'm gonna start by putting my butter and my brown sugar into my bowl and turning this onto about medium to low, somewhere in between there. I'm gonna let this mix just a little bit, or until it's nice and creamy and fluffy. So while this is mixing, I'm gonna add my milk, and I added my vanilla to this as well, just so we wouldn't have to use so many bowls, which is a good hack if you're gonna be a baker, because it's all the bowls and dishes after that's the hard part and the annoying part about baking. But if you kind of work smarter and don't work harder, it makes it a lot easier. But we're adding milk into our mixture just to replace some of the moisture that would have come from our eggs. And now we're gonna add our salt. What the salt does is when you add it into a baked ingredient or any kind of cake or anything, it doesn't make it salty. What it actually does is it brings out the flavor. So if you have vanilla in here, for example, it'll bring out the vanilla flavor. And it'll balance the sweetness. So now we're gonna turn this off and we can finally start adding our flour. And if you dump it all in there, it'll make a huge cloud and it'll go everywhere. So I'm gonna save me and my family the mess, and I'm gonna scoop it in there slowly. Just gonna add a little bit at a time. That should be good for now. And you can turn this back on. All right, now once that's mixed in, we can add a little bit more of our flour. And you want to continue doing this until all of your flour is gone and everything is incorporated. And I'm also going to take this opportunity to scrape down the sides because we want to make sure everything is super incorporated and we don't have any clumps of butter or clumps of sugar or clumps of flour. And now we can add the best part when it comes to cookies. We can add the chocolate. Oh yeah. And to make sure I add a good bit of chocolate. Actually, you know what? Why not add the rest? We want to make sure there's lots of chocolate in here. There we go. I'm going to scrape it down a little bit. All right, so this is perfect. All right, and we have our second scoop of ice cream, and we're gonna do this a little bit differently than we did before. I'm gonna actually put on my chunks of cookie dough first and then ice it with some icing. You'll see what I'm talking about in a minute, but it'll kind of make it look like the pieces of cookie dough were mixed in the ice cream and it's kind of poking through, and it's gonna look really nice. So, I'm just gonna take some chunks of cookie dough and kind of just smush it onto the cake. You want to make it look kind of random because ice cream isn't perfect and it isn't uniform, so that's also another reason why this is a really good beginner cake. All right, so we can set this aside, and now we can prepare our icing for this. And I'm gonna end up taking a little bit of heavy cream just to soften my icing a little bit and make it a little bit easier to spread. There we go. And now, when you usually have cookie dough ice cream, you can see like little bits of chocolate in the ice cream. Even without the cookie dough, you can see little bits of chocolate. So, I'm gonna add a little chocolate to this and get my spatula and give this a good mix. See, this is why I also love imposter cakes, because even when you're making it, you can just envision how it's gonna look and you can see how it's coming together, and it just gets you so excited because you know in the end it's gonna look really good and it's gonna taste good. All right, so this is nice and mixed together, and we can get our cake back over here. It's looking a little crazy, but we're gonna put it together with this icing. So, I take my icing, kind of just smooth it on the best I can with the chocolate chunks, and I'm gonna kind of smooth around the cookie dough. We don't want to completely cover our cookie dough, because if we do, then basically we just put it on there for no reason. So you kind of want to smooth around it and kind of blend it into the icing. All right, so this is ready for the fridge, and we can move on to actually assembling our sundae bowl. So what we have here are our bananas. And so these are actually made of cake, and they're gonna go on the side of our ice cream sundae bowl. Because you know the typical ice cream sundae bowl, it has bananas with the ice cream and the whipped cream and the cherries and all that good stuff. But since this is supposed to be giant, I had to make giant bananas. So these are actually made out of cake, and how I made these is I cut out circles from a cake, I lined them up, and I made sure they were super duper chill. And so I then cut it in half to make the two halves of the banana, and then I iced it and covered it in fondant, and you can see the yellow color. So what I did is I actually painted it with food coloring and a little bit of lemon extract. You can use vanilla extract or lemon extract, either one works. And I kind of like made a little texture on the bananas, because you know, even though this is an imposter cake and it can look perfect, we want to make this as realistic as possible. And so, you know, when a banana hits the air, it starts to get a little bit brown. We don't want rotten bananas, so we still have them yellow, but I put little spots of brown on there just to make it as realistic as possible. And so, for our ice cream sundae dish, this is actually, believe it or not, this is actually a fruit bowl. You can use anything that'll look sort of similar to an ice cream bowl, but this looks pretty good. So I'm gonna kind of pry these off of my board just to make sure they're not sticking at all. Those are good. And now we have one more step to do before we actually put our bananas in our bowl. So what I actually have here are some cake crumbs. this is a really good project to make if you have like leftover cake or cake from from an event that you want to use. So you don't have to waste as much cake and as many ingredients, which is why this is a really good cake. So what I'm going to do with these cake crumbs is I'm going to actually put some at the bottom of my bowl just to bulk it up some. And so that way when we put our ice cream scoops in there, you can actually see them sitting on top without having to make giant ice cream scoops. And even if you can see a little bit of the cake at the bottom, it's not really that big of a deal because it is cake. So it's just gonna look like you wanted some ice cream and you also wanted your cake too. All right, and here we are, our bananas. Ooh. Place them in the side. Okay, this looks good. I'm so excited. Okay, this looks really good. Oh, perfect. And then I'm gonna do this again with our second banana. All right. 3, 2, 1. All right. Okay, good. All right. So we have our banana cakes in there. All right, just make sure they're sitting correctly. All right, so you can see a little bit of our cake on the edges, and we're gonna make sure to just cover this up so it looks as good as possible. So I'm gonna actually take my fondant, and what fondant is, it's like a marshmallow or sugary kind of consistency. Usually it's made with marshmallows or sugar. Well, usually it all the time is made with sugar, but you can use this for cakes, for decorating. You can mold it, you can shape it, you can cut it, and it's really helpful if you want to amp up your baking. And this is a really good cake to practice using fondant. So we're going to roll out our fondant, but to make sure it doesn't stick to our surface, I'm going to be using a little bit of cornstarch. You can use cornstarch or you can use powdered sugar. Powdered sugar is the same thing as confectioner sugar and icing sugar. So you can use either one, but I prefer to use cornstarch. I'm going to take this really cute little scoop, put some on my surface, and take a little brush that I use just for baking and spread it around. Now I can take my fondant. Actually, I'll use this little piece too. I'm going to form it into a little ball. Put it on my surface. I'm going to put a little more on top just to make sure it doesn't stick, and a little on my rolling pin. And I'm going to roll this out nice and thin. And now, just to ensure it doesn't stick to our surface, I like to just rotate it ever so often. And so that way, when you rotate it, you make sure you get an even, nice piece. And so it's not thicker on this side or thinner on this side. It's a nice, even piece of fondant. Right. And now, brush off any excess cornstarch. And now I'm going to take my banana again, and I'm going to use just a little bit of icing. And smooth it on our banana, and this is going to help our fondant to stick. And now we can take our piece of fondant, brush it off, and stick it right on. And now, I'm going to take some kitchen scissors that I use for baking and just cut off any of the excess fondant. And now you want to repeat this on all 4 sides of your banana. And it seems like it would take a while, but honestly, it really doesn't. You can actually get this done pretty quick. So now we have our 4 pieces of fondant on there, and we can now paint these pieces to look a little bit more like the inside of a banana rather than white pieces of fondant. So I'm going to paint these pieces the same way I did the outside, except I'm going to make it like a very, very pale yellow. So that way it doesn't look the same as the outside. We don't want it to blend in. We want to make sure that we differentiate the outside and the inside of the banana. So I'm going to take a little bit of my ivory food coloring. All right. And a little bit of yellow. All right. And usually when I paint cakes, I like to use gel food coloring just because they go a longer way. You don't have to use as much, and the colors are more vibrant and they're a lot more realistic when making imposter cakes. So now I'm going to dilute this a pretty good bit with my lemon extract. Ooh, there we go. The color is here. Oh yeah. Just take my sponge and blend this really well. We don't want the color to be too harsh. Oops. There we go. This is looking really nice. This is kind of like an art project, you know. Baking is art. Baking is a science. So if you love art and you love science, you should try baking. 2 of my favorite subjects in school are math and science. So it should be a pretty good explanation why I love to bake. Alrighty, so now we can finally get to assembling our sundae and seeing it come together. My favorite part. I've got my 2 scoops of ice cream out the fridge. The icing isn't soft anymore. When you touch it, nothing should come up on your fingers. And so now I can just place these on top of my bananas. All right, so we have our scoops of ice cream in our container. And now, to amp it up and make them look like scoops of ice cream, I'm going to take a little bit of my buttercream and kind of just scoop it around the edge. This is going to make it look like it was actually scooped. You can kind of see. Now this wouldn't be a Taylor Time episode without trying our creation, so here I have my giant spoon for my giant sundae, and I'm going to try this side in honor of my sister. So here we go. Got to get a good bit of everything. Ooh. This is amazing. I love the chocolate flavor and I love the cookie dough. Cookie dough goes really, really nicely with the cake and the sprinkles, of course. So, to end this episode, I would love to say happy birthday to my sister, happy birthday to Echo, and I hope you enjoyed the first season of season 2 of Taylor Time, and I hope you stick around. Bye!